at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. Come closer. Closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. We come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, or approximately around there, and we chat about guns for about an hour. So we got Dead Horse jumping in from Utah. Thanks for joining.
Howdy.
Got Dog Body. You're in Nevada, right? And you're muted, but you didn't say. If you said something, we didn't hear it. Oh, you're unmuted, but we're not hearing it. Are you guys hearing him?
Negative.
Oh, we probably should have mic checked before. But anyway.
Oh. How about now? You picking me up?
Now you're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in southern Nevada.
Right on. Which, we'll have to talk about that. And then got Woods from the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest.
Thanks for the invite.
You bet. Thanks for jumping in. So you got no school tomorrow or something? Why are you up so late?
We got a bunch of meetings. The kids leave early, and there's a bunch of meetings about shit that I've heard about a million times.
Right
so I don't have to be that conscious for that.
That works out for us. So we got some other links out there if people want to jump in. We do run this on YouTube only because Night Strike hasn't quite got the live thing working over on guntube.org, in which case we'll drop YouTube like the gun-hating assholes that they are, and we don't watch the chat over there anymore. So if you want to chat with us on this show, head over to gunchannels.com. A lot of good people put their hard-earned money to make gun channels happen. It's 5 years old. We're not watching the YouTube side anymore, at least not on this show. You guys want to, feel free. I ain't. So now we'll dig into the show. It is episode something. It screwed it all up, so we're going to call it episode 672, but pretty soon we'll be past episode 700. It's Tuesday, so we like to take a look at our Second Amendment. We're going to talk about the state of Utah, which is an awesome state, especially for Second Amendment, but for lots of other things too. We're going to talk about some 2A groups and then whatever y'all want to talk about. Everybody's got a book coming up. Woods has things he always likes to bring up. They're interesting, and Dead Horse has always got stuff to talk about. So before we dig in, anything we want to start with?
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no worries. Good, no problem. So yeah, we'll dig it. State of Utah. Dead Horse, you're probably the resident expert. You want to give us a elevator speech on what it's like to live in Utah, gun-wise, Second Amendment-wise?
Second Amendment-wise is absolutely awesome. I hear these horror stories and I watch these videos on YouTube of people just open carrying, being harassed, or or just having certain firearm regulations, like you have to have a pin muzzle breaker, just all sorts of weird stuff. And I don't have to deal with any of that. So it's just been a real blessing to be able to live here and not have to experience those type of regulations and all of a sudden like, oh, I have to have fixed stocks or have this or that and change all my guns over. And I just haven't had to go through something like that before. So it's been a blessing that I probably take for granted too much. Just in being able to walk down the street with a sidearm or a rifle slung over your shoulder, walk into a store open carrying, and just no one says anything. Like the police officers will literally wave at you as you walk down the street as they drive by. They don't stop you and ask you for your license or what you're doing, stuff like that. So it's really 2A friendly in that aspect. We have somewhat constitutional carry in our vehicles. Where you don't need any kind of special license or anything to keep a loaded firearm in your vehicle here, just on your person if it's concealed. And hopefully we'll get the constitutional carry passed here soon. It's passed a couple other times. Our governor hasn't signed it into law, but for the most part, I mean, it's an awesome 2A state. We have tons of gun stores. We have tons of gun manufacturers who make all sorts of guns and gun parts and accessories. And a lot of manufacturing goes here. And our state specifically goes out and looks for these manufacturers, gun manufacturers, and offers them tax incentives to move here, to move their manufacturing and stuff here. And so not only are we okay with them building guns here and making guns here, we try and keep them here and bring them here with tax incentives and all sorts of stuff like that. So even our, even the government itself is, for the most part here is, we like guns. Like everyone, Utah's a heavily LDS state. LDS are probably some of the world's best preppers as far as guns, ammo, food, supplies, and stuff like that goes. That's pretty much built into their religion, and that I think has helped benefited our gun laws here from some of the crappy ones that we've had come up not pass. So they've tried to pass stuff here, but it gets shot down pretty quick.
Couple of things. There was something about schools a while back, and I thought you guys, from what I remember over the years, you guys kind of led the way with letting teachers do their thing, and then as far as open carry of students. And then I want to talk about something else after that. But wasn't there something in the news? Maybe I'm not from Utah. I don't really hang out here. It's only my second visit, and I just don't. There's too many other states to pay attention to. I don't remember the specifics. But wasn't there something about? It was like some kind of an incident with a murderer who decided for political reasons to become infamous, knowing that the agenda-based media was going to make him infamous if he used a certain implement, like a firearm. And he chose to do that. And then instead of ducking and cowering like a lot of other areas would, you guys went the other way and armed students or teachers or both?
Yep, we sure did. We armed all of our teachers. We give them the option if they want to carry or not. It's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell thing. And we have awesome companies like UGE Exchange, Utah Gun Exchange, which is also YouTube. They give free concealed carry classes to any teacher. So if you're a teacher or a student, they give you a free concealed carry class. So
and I've heard the number is at 5,000 at this point.
Actually, probably more than that, because they're not the only one giving free classes to the teachers. So that's
specifically UTG is up to 5,000 concealed carry permit holders that they train for free.
Yep, and all those are teachers and stuff like that. And with going to parent-teacher conferences and stuff, I've talked to some of my kids' teachers, and I know that my kids' teachers, like, they carry guns, and from what I can tell, it's about at least a 50-50 thing, that about half the teachers are armed now, and I think that's a really good thing. And then we got open carry on college campuses, and which no one really practices on the college campuses. You'll hardly see the open carrier that much on a college campus, but at least we have it, and that's a step in the right direction. So if we want to evoke that right, we can at any time.
Open chat, so you guys, if there's dead air, feel free to chime in. But Woods, I know you're an educator, but
I work in an elementary school, so I'm wondering how much the elementary teachers would be doing that, because I think it'd be great. I walk by the sign every day, and I actually kind of laugh at it that my Second Amendment stops apparently right here. If we wanted to try to arm teachers, I think we'd have a hard time getting grade schools to do that. But that's kind of awesome that that you have the option. Because like right now in Washington State, it's against Washington code for me to do that. But I would like just the law to go away. And even if there was just a district policy, I might be able to live with the district policy, but I don't want to, commit a crime or anything. But in looking at all the information and like even talking to UG, one thing I think we all have to remember is, school shootings don't happen hardly ever. There's a better chance that the building gets hit by lightning. And I've been trying to push that a little more, that that fear that we have when it comes to schools and shooting and stuff, it really doesn't happen that often. Like fires happen way more often. There's way bigger problems and more dangerous things that happen in a school than a shooting.
I mean, I'd suggest that like a car goes out of control and hits a school building more often than a murderer decides to pick up an implement that'll make them infamous on the agenda-based media.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Now that said, would I like it a little better if I got to carry in the school? By all means, but I also work in an area that's the area's got some struggles, and I'm one of those teachers that picked that on purpose. And I'm more worried about like a bad guy running onto campus that is like fleeing the cops, because we've had that before, but they're not necessarily armed or dangerous or something. But I've definitely had to say, hey, you get the hell out of here before the cops can come, because I'm surrounded by generally between 25 and 50-year-old white chicks that aren't going to fight anybody, because there's no security or anything. There's just me and one other guy. But that's not every school. And then usually middle schools and high schools usually have a bigger ex-military population, and there's a lot more guys in middle school and high school. Only 2% of teachers in the United States are even guys. Not saying that women can't have firearms by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's more likely that they are.
Now, go ahead, Doc Buddy.
I was just going to say, I went to when I finished high school, the high school I finished at had a gun range that had been closed off on the campus. And I think of it, we went, I don't know how many years in this country where kids used to come to school with their rifles, and we had marksmanship teams and everything else, and we never had an issue. I think it's ridiculous that apparently we've gotten less trustworthy, and it's all because of narratives they want to push. They don't want to push reality.
Well, yeah, I'm old enough to remember. I used to drive to high school in my truck with the Marlin 60. I mean, just in the truck, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. Nobody really thought anything of it.
Yeah, like I said, I just, the fact that people are making a big deal about teachers potentially choosing to arm themselves, and, I'd be more concerned about how many teachers are drinking with the students than I would be over a teacher carrying a gun.
Exactly. You are exactly right, Dog Daddy. I would be more concerned about that, because even in my small town, we had a teacher who did something similar with like that with students, right? Inappropriate and stuff, right? But like we haven't had like any kind of teacher like, have a problem with them having a firearm since they all started carrying guns. Like not one single problem of, no accidents, no accidental, NDs or, accidental discharges or nothing like that. Like there hasn't been a single issue. And it's out of sight, out of mind. I think the kids kind of know, because like, my kids have talked about it and stuff. And I think the kids kind of have it worked out on which teachers they think have a gun and which ones they don't. And but they still, all they really do is just guess, right? They still don't even know for sure. So, which I think is a good thing. Like, that's the whole point of concealed carry.
One thing I've noticed is I talk to a lot of teachers that get really up in arms about arming teachers, and they're like, oh my God, I have to get a gun now. And like, I keep telling them, nobody's telling you have to get a gun. Those of us that can want the option. Nobody's saying you have to. I'm not saying that. That's not what we're saying. But it's got the media's got this thing out there that's a lie, that's saying that we're going to arm teachers and teachers are going to have to or something. And I've heard it probably 25, 30 times.
Oh, so they think that they're like, they're going to be like, oh, you have to carry a gun now. And like, yeah, no, this is America. You have a choice.
Well, quite honestly, I know some really wonderful teachers that are damn near Disney princesses. They're not going to shoot anybody ever. They're just not in their nature. It's not in their makeup. It's not going to happen.
Well, I'm going to put it like this. I don't know the total number, and it'd be interesting to find out what there is. But if we start with Columbine and go up to the Florida shooting, we've lost 5 school officials who were on campus who died protecting students, who all happened to be concealed carry holders who weren't carrying because they were at work.
Yeah, true that.
So, I mean, that just shows right there that we could have potentially saved so many lives.
I don't think one of them had it. If even one of them had something, because what we know about shooters, what we know about the murderers that come is that if you put up any resistance, they fold up shop.
I think that from what like all the teachers I remember back in school, like even the teachers I didn't like and didn't like me, I don't have a single doubt in my mind that those teachers wouldn't have stepped in front of a gun for me or any other kid. Because I think when you teach, you don't do it for the money. That's for sure. And,
God no.
because you love the kids, right? And you know you love what you do, and you want to do something for our next generation, right? You want to make the world a better place. And so I have no doubt that all those teachers did that 100% willingly, like, you know, and was using themselves as shields and stuff, which is super sad.
Right. So one of the things that when Woods was talking there made me think, you've seen I'm sure you've seen stuff where they'll talk to a mom and they'll say, "Would you kill somebody?" Of course not. Oh, it's not in my nature. I would never do it. Like, would you kill somebody that was about to kill you? Nope, that's my time to die. Like that's how it is. That was meant to be. That sucks, but we all die, and that was my time. Would you kill somebody who's about to kill your kid? Yes. Right. So
That's true. Yeah, I guess that is true.
How come that doesn't apply to these teachers? Would you be satisfied with that answer when instead you could say, well, if there was a fire, do you just acknowledge that fires happen and it's time to die, or do you have the kids run through exercises to, or whatever, exercises to get the hell out of the school and know how to work a fire extinguisher, perhaps? Like, oh, there's a fire extinguisher there, but it's not my nature to use a fire extinguisher. If a fire happens, even if it's my fault, the kids are going to die and I'm going to die and maybe the rest of the school will burn down, but that's the time to, no, they're not going to take that. They're going to say, show me how to use that fire extinguisher. If someone says stranger danger in the parking lot or whatever the equivalent is today, okay, well, is that kid, too bad. Kids are going to get lost to stranger danger. Or do you, do everything you could possibly do to stop that person from doing something weird to some kid? Right? No, they're going to go out there and do everything within their means. So why does it stop with guns?
That is an excellent point.
And again, I think that, like Dead Horse said, you don't need to force it on anybody. Or I think it was Dead Horse said, you don't have to force it on anybody. If they don't want to, they don't have to. It's the unknown, right? The bad guy doesn't know, but he knows that there's lethal force potentially. They're done. They're only bad guys because it's opportunity. They have absolutely nothing to fear, and they have everything to gain. The only question is how big the media will spin it. If they've done enough horrible things, then will the media realize it? When we got into schools, I'm not a big school fan. Like Wood said, this is talking about stuff that happens less often than lightning. And like I said, I think less often than cars accidentally losing their safety brake and like plowing into a building, which happened to my schools when I was a little kid twice. Like, there wasn't like drunk drivers. It was just a teacher was an idiot, bus driver, something, knocked a corner out of a school. One time a vehicle went straight into a classroom. There was only like 3 feet of brick and then some windows. Like, are we going to start fortifying everything into a prison because sometimes a car gets loose? Makes no sense to me. I think it's a diversion. It's an ambush, and they know that when they hit emotional triggers like that, everybody gets goofy. Everybody wants to suggest options, and we have a tendency to want to talk stuff through or whatever. And again, you don't talk something through with a fire. You don't talk something through with a tornado. There's tornado drills at every school. You don't just go, well, weather happened. Al Gore said it's time for our school to be wiped off the planet. No, you figure out ways to protect those kids from flying debris, right? Anyway, let's get off of schools and get back on Utah, which is an excellent effing state. What I want to ask Dead Horse and the rest of the panel, so you don't need to live in Utah for this, is it possible that because every firearm that we know of was invented like 7 miles north of me, 17 miles north of me right now, is it possible that Utah just has it in its essence and firearms are a thing? I know the Mormons are a factor, but is it possible that when you grow up knowing that every mechanism in a firearm that we still use today, no matter the platform, no matter the caliber, it was invented out of a guy's brain like several miles north of me right now?
In a workshop that looks like it could be like in any guy's garage, really, too. I mean, because we're talking about tools that are 100 years old or over 100 years old, so like it's not like it was state-of-the-art technology necessarily either, that they were making this these guns out of. At the time, I'm sure it was, but not by today's standards, right?
Well, I mean, I spent some time in Utah years ago, up in Flaming Gorge around Vernal. And one thing that I found when I was there is that and I hate to generalize like this, but I found that the Mormon people who I met while I was there, the firearms ownership and being very proud of being self-sufficient was very prevalent in their state. And I think that's something that's probably carried over throughout that state since the Mormons settled there. I think that's just a big part of their culture that they've kept it alive.
Oh yeah. The Mormons in their history already went through like a gun ban once, because of a town that they were in. So when they went through that once and then left that, and having their guns taken from them, they were kind of the opinion like this ain't gonna happen again, I think. And they're really good preppers, and I think most of them really see the need for guns and stuff. And that's one thing is like I really like about the people here in Utah is we don't have a lot of those the bleeding hearts here. You know, like if you only save one type stuff, we don't have that. So it's so prevalent in our culture. Even little girls who are like 7 and 8, 9 years old here are like they already know gun safety here. You can pretty much go up to any kid here almost and just, you know, like they already know gun safety. They've already shot guns. They've already been around, you know, been around it their whole life.
Well, right on. I think that's actually that's a big part of it, right? Because now when somebody in the agenda-based media tries to trickle down, disseminate some influence on them and say, this is how gun owners are, they don't even have to say, what about my grandpa or what about my brother or what about somebody I know? They can say, no, I know that. That's wrong. You're duping me in what other ways? So you don't have to question. You're immune to their influence or their propaganda, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, Utah's pretty awesome. You got suppressors. You got suppressors while hunting.
Yep.
Right on. So you have plenty of every shop in here's got everything a gun shop would have. I've been to a couple of cities, unfortunately, and then a couple of states even where whatever local blah 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 they can't have, even though the state can have, you know, they can't have. But that's not the case here. I mean, each store has a pretty decent selection. We have a lot of firearms. You know, when I say firearms, I mean specifically firearms, things that are not handguns, that are not rifles, that are not shotguns. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I sit in a chat once in a while, or I listen to chats occasionally, and I'll hear these pessimistic people that are lazy and don't want to fight anymore. And they'll say, we never win nothing. We never win. They always win. They have the long game and we never win, right? Except that there's firearms in like every store I've been in. I've been in like 50 something stores so far. Every one of them has shockwaves. Every one of them has TAC 14s. Every one of them has some sort of little 9mm garbage with a brace on it. Every one of them has the ability to order that stuff, right? Come on. Tell me about 3 years ago. Tell me about 5 years ago if that was even on the horizon, if that was even a thing. Like, did we even know to fight for that? It just happened.
Yep.
It didn't just happen. It happened with a lot of effort and people buying those things. As capitalists, we bought them. The company said, hey, these are selling. Let's make them. And ideally, we have people in government at this point that aren't interested in trying to infringe every 2 seconds, only every 5 or 6 seconds. What else can we talk about Utah being awesome? It looks kind of like a magazine. It looks kind of like a channel magazine, I think.
Yeah. A lot of people say it's very, very beautiful here. We're kind of known, our state motto is like the greatest snow on earth. So we're really known for our snow and our skiing and our ski resorts. That's probably what we're most famous for. Oh,
I was saying like the shape of it looked like a FAL, the gun, 308 magazine. But no, you're right. In fact, one of the ways I describe it when I'm chatting about Utah is it looks to me, every time I see Utah, and it doesn't matter where, even where you live at, because of the way that the mountains are, it's not like Wyoming where the basins are so wide, the areas between mountain ranges are so wide that you only see mountain ranges on the horizons. In Wyoming, everything's a bit bigger scale, so you see mountains either up close or right far away. In Utah, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm up here in the little smushed part or whatever, but it looks like a what should I say, like a model railroad. It looks like a little pristine, perfect like vacation village, except that the whole city looks like that. And maybe it's because of the way they deliberately laid it out, or obviously because they picked a, like you say, a freaking beautiful place to put it. But I think it's like something about the proportion of your mountains versus the basins between them, where a city or a town will fill up that basin, and it's not like overpopulation sprawl with buildings and stuff that look gross. It's like everybody's got a nice yard, and like everybody takes pride in their stuff, so the roads are well maintained, and there's like, I don't know, it just seems like little railroad round model railroad villages when I look around.
Yeah, I can totally see that, you know, and I think our cities are pretty well laid out here. They're all laid out on a pretty much just a standard grid pattern, and done really well. And it's easy to find addresses here and stuff like that, because everything's just on a coordinate system where it just goes higher or lower up in numbers depending on whether you're going north, south, east, or west. So it makes it real easy if you're like a delivery guy or something to find, you know, just to go right to where you're going. You don't really need, once you know how it works and stuff, like you don't need GPS or nothing to live out here to find an address. You just need the address, and the streets themselves will pretty much tell you where to go, you know, just by watching the numbers grow. And the driving here can be crazy. You know, like you know, I've been to a lot of way bigger cities that are way more dense than densely populated than here at the big cities here in Utah, and I still think Utah has some of the worst drivers.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. I don't want to get into that because I want to talk about how awesome it is. Weather-wise, you got decent summers that aren't sweltering, from what I understand, and you got winters that aren't going to kill you, but every once in a while you get a summer that'll kill you and a winter that'll kill you, right?
Oh yeah, we've definitely had 106-degree days and stuff like that. Usually gets hot here in July is the hottest time of year. We've had really bad winters, you know, 8 feet of snow, stuff like that. That's not the common though. That's not the norm, but you know, but we can have extreme weather. But for the most part, it's mild summers, mild winters for the most part. It really is. So unless you live above 6,000 feet, once you get above 6,000 feet, that's the real snow line, and that's where you're going to get, you know, you're going to have snow pretty much all winter long on the ground.
Well, and then tomorrow the weather's saying snow at 6,000 feet, so
Yep,
that's a lot of the town. That's all the mountains and probably into the town a little bit, right?
yeah, yep, it sure is.
I'm gonna go at it, since this is the Daily Gun Show and I'm on the Gun Show Loophole tour, specifically, you know, checking out gun shops and comparing them and trying to share, you know, my experiences going to these shops. I think I'm going to put Utah in a special category because Arizona is pretty good, and it's hard for me to compare things because I just know Arizona more intimately because I'm there all the time, and I go to gun shops constantly. So I got to kind of throw Arizona out of there. But if I can think of like Texas and the other states that I've been to, I've only been to corners of like Montana, you know, one corner and the other corner. I've been across North Dakota now. I've been across South Dakota. Those states, at least, those northern states, they can't compete because they're so sparsely populated that there just aren't enough towns to have enough gun shops to you know, be of consequence. Let's say, I don't want to say that, I don't want to diss any of those gun shops. There's some really cool gun shops, but as far as like big picture looking down from a map of the country, there just isn't enough opportunity for there to be a ton of gun shops in some of those cities or some of those states even. Then you get east and you get into the shitholes where the population's so high and the crime and everything. There's just issues with having gun shops. And there's some, I'm not saying there's not awesome gun shops everywhere, but as a general rule, and then you get into like California and Illinois, change the game again because they got so many crazy restrictions and so few people interested in actually pursuing the extreme stuff and, you know, not being legally able to. Gun shops hands are tied, right? and they're just not, you know, I'm going to say their hands are tied and their mouths are taped shut, so they're not able to even come up for air. Like they got all kinds of issues, so they're handicapped a little bit. But then you get into like, you know, your New Mexico and your Texas and some Oklahoma and stuff, and those are again not necessarily huge except for Texas, but there's a different kind of proportion or ratio of gun shops. So I'm going to say Utah stands alone, at least from my experience, in like number of awesome gun shops per square mile. So, you know, I've seen a bunch of them on this trip already. I've seen a bunch of them in 2010. And even if they've come and gone since then, I have a pretty good idea how many there are. If you just go to Google Maps, you see what I mean. They're distributed all over the city, all over the area, and they're of quality and, you know, contents of the shops are just better than everywhere. Like I say, there's definitely better shops in the rest of the country. I'm not saying every shop in Utah is awesome, but I definitely think you guys stand alone. And it's obviously something to do with the people who want that much stuff and who value it and buy that stuff so that these gun shops can exist. And then you go back there over and over so that these gun shops can stay around. But it's also, I don't know, it's fun to be able to dig around to such a variety of awesome shops in one spot and not have to go, you know, from this town 4 hours over to the next town and see the two awesome gun shops in that state kind of thing. I don't know if that was a question, but that's my perception of the shops around here, or at least compared to some of the other states. All right, did I lose the internet?
I lost it for a second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I was just trying to figure out. So, General saying sausage and blueberry pancakes are to town, simple and tasty. And he's saying Detroit has a fair number of gun shops. A lot of smaller ones are struggling or closed, though. Exactly, and that's where I mean, there had to be one shop. Didn't we go to a shop today that? Or no, we thought we found a shop that was closed, but we just had stupid Google Maps send us the wrong place. That Penguin Tactical, that was around the corner from where we thought it was closed. So I imagine there are gun shops that close up here, but every single state I've been in has had gun shops that no longer exist anymore, and that's sad. So yeah, I think I agree with you there that but
I'm happy to see we don't really have gun shops closing. We have more gun shops opening. So there is constantly a new gun shop opening here. And it's not like one or two are closing and then one's opening. Like, no, all the rest are still there. And then a new one's and more are coming. So it's really growing here. You know, the gun shops and, you know, it's just, you know, like I live in a small town of, you know, 100,000 people. And we have like, you know, basically 4 gun shops for that small of a town.
And so you're not even counting like a Walmart that has guns or like another sporting goods store, like a Tractor Supply. The Tractor Supplies here have guns.
Yep. And the Cow Ranch stores have guns. And if I counted all the places in my town of 100,000 people that I could go buy a gun, it would probably be about 9 stores, about 9 different places I could go for that small of a town.
And so, like you're saying, I don't think you're just bragging either, because you've got CCW. So that's always a thing. You've got people that are buying them out of just general interest and curiosity and investment and just regular reasons to buy a gun, I guess. But then you obviously have hunting, really good hunting and all kinds of it, everything from varmint to like fancy exotic stuff almost, or at least the big game. And then you've got long range out the butt, like talk about long range, literally
miles. Yep.
And you got competitions all over the freaking place. And I'm probably missing stuff. But you got the whole shebang. You know, it's not like one of these cities or one of these states where they got trees everywhere. So it's just tough to have a long distance range, or they just don't have shotgun for some reason. You got some excellent ranges here with facilities, and like you say, you can go anywhere in nature, and basically I'm guessing you're a lot like Arizona. You got a lot of BLM and Forest Service and stuff that's public land that you can shoot on.
Yes, a lot of public land that we can shoot on. Literally thousands of square miles of public land to shoot on.
Where Texas, biggest state, they act like they're so good, but it's all private. So good luck trying to do anything as a regular Joe Schmo in Texas unless you know somebody. there's nowhere to just go do stuff. Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, we own all the public land, so we can go out there and recreate with our firearms.
Yep, and you don't get hassled or bothered or anything. And like, if anyone ever comes up and talks to you, it's like, hey, what are you shooting? Like, you know, oh, that's a cool gun. So then it's like, you know, gun conversation, like the cool stuff, right? And so like every time I've ever been approached by a DNR, they go around and manage all the BLM property here in Division of Natural Resources and stuff. And every time that I've been stopped by one of them, or they've come out and hunt, like during hunting season, if I'm out shooting, you know, they want to kind of come up and be like, hey, are you hunting deer? Are you just shooting, or what are you doing? You know, but they're just cool. They're like, what gun are you shooting? What are you? Yeah, like everyone just treats you here so nice when you have a firearm, because no one, like the actual you know, the law enforcement here and stuff, they don't look at guns and gun owners as evil people or bad guys, or, you know, a threat, really. Like, pretty much from like my law enforcement friends, they've straight up told me like they automatically assume every single person they pull over already has a gun. Like, that's just an automatic assumption they make here now. Is that just, oh, I'm pulling over this car for speeding, they have a gun. Like, that's just an automatic thought process that they assume everyone's has a gun here now.
And that probably leads to an environment of that is conducive to, you know, strong two-way state. I've been to states where they're not familiar, you know, and they're like, for example, where you have a what do they call it, a requirement to notify, or whatever it's called, where like you have to tell them as soon as they come up, like within the first utterances out of your mouth, I got a gun in the car. Like, I wouldn't want to be a cop where everybody's got to tell me that, you know. They're going to be a whole
and we don't. They're literally written into the law that we don't have to tell them. Like, even if they ask, we don't have to tell them at all. Like, even if they ask, do you got a gun in the car? We can legally say no. So it's not even, they don't really ask you here ever. Like, they don't, it's not a thing when you get pulled over here for speeding or something. Like when me and Bob were pulled over, when we went to the Browning Museum, Bob and I, and we were pulled over by an officer leaving John Browning's house. Actually, we were just leaving John Browning's house, and we got pulled over because we were just pulling out. And we didn't have our seatbelts on, so they pulled us over for the seatbelts. And, you know, we're talking to the police officer, telling them, yeah, we're checking out these guns. We're gun guys. Like, he didn't, not one time did he ask, do you guys got a gun? He just automatically assumed everyone in the car did. And he was super nice and said, oh, like that's awesome. And he even told us where John Browning, like other John Browning stuff was, the police officer did. And then told us, make sure to put on your seatbelts. Have a nice day. Like, no ticket, no nothing. I mean, so Bob got to experience that firsthand. And I think Bob was kind of shocked. Like, he was like, wow, that was like so cool.
Right on. Well, one of the reasons we do the show daily is so we can feature a gun shop every day. So I'm going to say, let's feature John Browning's collection of factories and everything in Ogden. So we had a chance today to go up to the museum again and check out not just the museum, but 3 of his factories and his home. And we actually located all of them this time instead of just assuming or Google mapping it. But yeah, we had a chance to pull up in front, touch them, and it's awesome. So I don't know, where are we going to start that at?
I think if you're a gun guy, period, and you're even just passing through Utah on your way to somewhere else, even if it's a couple miles out of the way, I think it's worth that trip to go up to the museum. And pretty much, you know, business hours 9 to 5 or 10 to 5, and just to go up to that. And you can spend all day there, really. Like, you really could. And it's not that it's that big, but there's a lot of other stuff to do there. But it's just so cool, and the guns are just so
significance of the stuff that's there. It's his, it's his stuff, and it's all from the family, and it's thorough. It's really complete, like history of his works.
You can have John Browning books or Winchester books like I do, and that museum have the actual guns that aren't prototype guns. Some of the very first ones of a certain model he ever made, guns that were never released, never manufactured. They just literally have the couple prototypes there and stuff like that. So you can see like some of the things that he and his son were working on. and you know, some of this their creativity and kind of the path they were going down. You know, a fully automatic lever action, basically a lever action rifle, but a fully automatic one, right? Like you could just hold and pull the trigger, and it's fully auto. You know, like you know, back in 1900, that crazy stuff like that. Really, the
Full
first
auto, and
machine gun.
you don't stop it; it just empties the mag. Like you pull the trigger
Yeah,
and empties the magazine. Pretty cool.
the tube, yeah, it empties the tube because yeah, it was tube fed, right? It was just it sits there and empties that tube full auto. It's crazy.
And that particular one, the story is he was out shooting with his brother, and he noticed that the grass was moving every time he shot. So he thought, how can I harness that energy to do something? And then he created automatic guns. And then later on, he decided to create semi-automatic guns and the lever action and everything. So yeah, pretty awesome. Have you guys ever considered? Have you ever visited the area? Is there not?
Yeah. No, when I was in Utah, visiting John Browning's shop was on my list of things to do. I find it fascinating. I agree that you could spend an entire day there. You know, it's sad because in California they have like the Winchester House, which used to have a much bigger selection of all the old Winchester products, and I've watched them slowly eliminate that stuff. So I'm really glad that in Utah they're protecting all of John Browning stuff.
I'd love to make a pilgrimage there. I definitely need to get down there.
John Browning has his own state holiday here. John
Really?
Browning Day. Yeah, John Browning Day.
What, his birthday?
No, I believe John Browning Day is February 14th, when the 1911 pistol was first patented.
Right on.
So Valentine's Day here is really John Browning Day. So if you really love someone, you'll give them a 1911 for Valentine's Day.
Now that's a tradition I like.
So we figured out this time that if you actually read what's going on in the museum, they actually tell you where the factories are. So John Browning is the son of Jonathan Browning, and there's also some of his guns there. Jonathan Browning was born in Kentucky, I think, and then eventually moved to Illinois just before the Mormons got run out of Illinois physically, violently. And he had created the harmonica gun before that, which is the gun that looks like a bunch of cylinders in a bar that come through the gun like a harmonica, I guess. And so he had obviously innovation and creation in his blood, and just the situation with Illinois and whatnot. He got run out, and so you've got Jonathan Browning, and then you've got John Browning. Where the hell was I going with this? Shit, I just started thinking about Jonathan Browning, and I totally forgot where I was going with this.
His whole family lineage, because they have his son's guns, Val and stuff there too.
Oh, I guess that's what I was saying. Yeah, there's a timeline on the wall there, and we actually I spent time looking at it. So yeah, I was saying Jonathan Browning was in Illinois. He couldn't. It seems like because of the situation in his life and the circumstances and the timeline and everything, with that influence of people running all the Mormons out of Illinois, he just didn't have a chance to create and innovate and whatever he would probably had in him. But he brought all his tooling with him. He came to Ogden. He has a second wife. He's a polygamist, or was a polygamist. So his second, I think he had 16 kids with his first wife, and then he had like a second wife with a whole bunch of kids. He named all of them John. I don't know what's going on with that, but that's where John Browning comes from. He's the only one that kept the name. All his brothers went with some other name. So you've got Jonathan Browning has John Browning with his second wife, and John Browning has some brothers. He builds his first gun before he goes on his Mormon mission. He figures out how to do the lever gun after seeing lever guns on his mission, comes back and makes that full auto lever gun, makes full autos, makes semi-autos, changes the world. So as he's doing that, he's going into business with his brothers. So I guess this is right after they come back from their mission. I'm trying to remember all this because the video wasn't working today. So basically, you got John Browning, a Mormon, coming back from his mission and going into the business of building guns and I guess bicycles. So they set up shop at the first place, and then this timeline explains, they basically he invents the full auto, and then he invents semi-auto and sells his first full auto was that lever action that Dead Horse is talking about. That was a complicated proof of theory type of thing, like a complicated machine. In other words, it wasn't practical, although I think it was used, what they say, in some war, so in some skirmish or whatever, in limited numbers. But then he came up with basically something that looks like a 1919, a more boxy looking thing that put all the mechanisms inside. But it was the first full auto. The government buys it, and he goes on to say, hey, building guns is the thing to do. So him and his brothers are building guns. They're selling patents. He hooks up with Winchester, starts selling patents. He eventually makes a 1911, sells that to the military, obviously, and keeps going. And each of these eras of his inventions, he moved factories. He would need a bigger factory, and they'd move. So it's all on this timeline on the wall at the museum. I'm not going to tell you the addresses because you can go to John Browning's museum and find those yourself. We'll tell you that they're on the timeline. And this time we figured that out. They tell you literally the addresses. So instead of having to go from the recollection of the people volunteering at the museum, we put those addresses into our map and set out to find the one that we knew where it was. The second one, we knew where it was because there's a big plaque in front of it. The third one, we weren't quite sure, but now we are, was right next to his house. So we saw his house again, and the third factory. And then he had a storefront over on the main street. So you can see the buildings, the facades or whatever out front, are still the same as they were when he built them, or at least when he was in them. And it's just awesome to see once, at least for me, once I kind of figured it all out with that timeline, like how him and his brothers went from, starting out to being successful, to being more successful, to becoming John Browning and having a massive, massive thing, that hotel basically to build 1911s and develop. Just awesome experience going to this town. It's all within a couple miles. You could probably walk it if you had the balls to walk around in those neighborhoods. And yeah, it's just really neat to be in the place where the world changed, really.
They have a lot of his machine guns there. The very first light machine gun prototype they have there, and it fired 600 rounds a minute. And the qualifier that the military wanted was to be able to do 3 minutes of sustained fire. So it fired 1,800 rounds in 3 minutes and passed the test without a malfunction. And when you look at this gun, I mean, it is an obvious prototype. It looks just like just pieces of steel just welded together, and there's really no beauty to it or anything. It's a pretty raw form prototype, right? Like this proof of concept. And I find that kind of stuff fascinating. In his workbench area, that's all preserved, where you get to see his mill, you get to see his barrel, his barrel rifling machine. You get to see like the actual hand tools and stamps and stuff he touched. And oh man. And then a lot of this stuff in that museum's donated, like grandsons of his and stuff like will come back and donate his actual pocket knife and stuff like that. And so you actually get to see like the pocket knife John Browning carried every day for like 40 years in his pocket, stuff like that.
From what I understand, that I don't know what to call it, like the room that is his workshop is, from what I understand, like the same as he left it. Like they brought it over here, but it's like the way that John Browning walked away from it is the way that it's in that room. And it's in a room that's, set up, mocked up. It's in the top of a train station, so it's not his workshop, but it's set up literally, the way that it was. And then the way that they have it set up is you walk into like a little glass area. So you're not just looking at it through a window, you're walking into the room and experiencing it. Like we were saying, you can literally smell the wood on the other side. It's not a kind of, you're not walking into a museum where it's so fancy that, everything's hermetically sealed or anything. Like you're in the same air as his tools and his bench and his prototypes.
Yeah, he has one of those A5 shotguns like taken apart on the bench, and it looks like he was trying to change something on it or modify something or a newer version, improve something, and it's just like all disassembled on the bench, just sitting there. That's the way he all left it. And then where the big building was, where the statue is out front that we went to, that's now like the hotel. That
Yeah.
very top part up there, I was telling you that like the penthouse up on top, that's where all that stuff was.
So, and this wasn't like he got sick and he basically went over to whatever, Belgium, died. So this was, not like he was like, I'm going to go die, so I'm going to put my bench here. He just went to Belgium, and that's the way his bench was.
Yep.
So awesome experience. I don't know if we're doing a great job of relaying it, but what is it, 7 or 14? Is it $7 each to get in or something?
Yeah, like $7.
$7. Leave them a tip if you want, and experience the people who volunteer there. They volunteer there because they're halfway interested, and even if they're only halfway interested, they know the history because there's usually a little movie going, so they know the movie, I'm sure, by heart. And if they're bored, I'm sure they've read a lot of those plaques. Plus, I suspect the guys that actually, and girls, because I've had a lady was running the thing the first time we went. I suspect they're in that room and not the train room and not the cowboy museum and not any of the other museums because they're interested in those firearms. So they're definitely a resource when you're at it to realize these are people that are probably as interested or more than we are and have a lot of knowledge, and they're there because they want to share that.
And it's a great, if you have young kids or a wife or something who might not necessarily be interested in the Browning Museum, in the same building, this literally like walk down a flight of stairs, and you got a huge train museum, you got a car museum, you got a little cowboy museum, and now they have an art gallery in there, and so there's other stuff to do for other family members while you're looking at guns too, which is kind of nice.
That is true, because it wouldn't be much good if we're in there looking at guns and they're just rolling their eyes in the back of their head, hating guns because they're bored. So it's probably good.
It's funny that you say that, Dead Horse, because everything you just listed made me happy, and I could see my wife's eyes rolling in her head with each one.
I've gone through all the museums there, and I haven't gone to the art gallery because it's like a real like art gallery thing, and I'm just not too arty. But the car museum, train museum, and I went through the Wild West Museum for the first time today because that's newer, and I really enjoyed it.
And that's because I figured out that they have one of the machines that smushes pennies, and you got those machines where they smash a penny and then it gives the imprint of whatever museum or location it's in. So I wanted to get some of those for our Patreon people. But the way this particular machine works is there's 4 different designs, one for the cars, one for the trains, one for something else, and then one with a 1911 on it for Browning's Gun Museum. And I had to kind of sit there and twist the knob a billion times to get it to reset to the gun one so that I could stick a penny in there and then crank the penny, smush it, and then rotate it about a billion times to get it back. So anyway, it took me about 2 hours to pop out like 6 of them pennies. So Dead Horse had plenty of time to.
You definitely had your exercise today just to crank in that handle.
All right. Well, so that was. Let's talk about the house. So first time I experienced any of this is in 2010. I flew up with our crew to check out the Outdoor Retailer show, which used to be hosted here in Salt Lake City. And the Outdoor Retailer is very similar to SHOT Show. It's a trade show, but I think it's open to the end users as well. But we went there as press, and we were still kind of cutting our teeth. We're only 4 or 5 years into going to trade shows as press, and it was a new trade show for us. So we flew up here from Tucson, had a rental car, and we had 3 days I think of the trade show, but I didn't want to come up here just for the trade show. It cost a couple of bucks to come up here. So we stayed a few extra days and we checked out gun shops and that museum. And the first time I went up there, we figured out that the museum was there. And then the lady, like I say, the lady was running it that time. And she kind of walked us around, very similar to what we experienced with Dead Horse and Bob when they went. But we were live during that show. or that visit, and she walked us around. You know, I might have been live. I forget. This was 2010. Was I live? If I was live, it was on Quick or Blog TV. It wasn't on YouTube yet, but we might have been live. But anyway, no, we wouldn't have been live because there wasn't that good of internet back then. I probably was recording it on video. But anyway, the lady walked us around and gave us a pretty decent tour of the place. And that's when she mentioned and his factories. And I never even fathomed that he had factories in town. I don't know why they put it in Ogden, right? Well, now, in 2010, that first visit, it's like, oh, okay. They got these factories. So we're looking at each other and we're like, let's go check out these factories, right? So we asked her where the factories were, and she was trying to recollect, and she sent us to the hotel because the hotel has a big plaque in front of it. Everybody knows that that's a Browning thing. And then she sent us to the one that has Browning and Sons. The Browning and Sons or Browning and Brothers? Anyway, it says, it still says Browning on the building. So that one's
I
easy.
think it's Brothers. Yeah.
I think it is Brothers. So, and then she couldn't recollect where the third one was. So we ended up driving around town for a little while. And I don't even think she told us about the house. I think we were driving around looking for the third one and then figured out that there's a John Browning house. So obviously he had to live somewhere, right? So it's this giant house. I mean, it seems giant. It looks like, it's 2 stories, maybe 3. There's a basement, I think. And then, I don't know, 5 or 6 rooms on each floor. And it's a pretty substantial house. I mean, he was a pretty rich guy at the time. So I'm guessing, he had a house. And I don't know how many kids he had, probably a bunch. So anyway, we figured out he had this house. So we walk up to the main door there, and it was for sale. It's actually always been for sale, I think. But it's what does they call that? Like a historic building or something. Like it's a historic landmark. So they had a little thing to pick up there if you were interested in buying it, like a little piece of paper type of deal. So we grabbed one, and it basically was given the description of the rooms and everything, but then made it clear that if you buy this thing, you can't do anything with it. Like it has to be kept historic or whatever. Like you can fix things, but you can fix them back to the way they were. You can't just,
it has to be preserved.
Yeah, and I got the impression you couldn't even run like high-speed internet in it or something. Like they wanted it to be, historic house. But whatever, I really don't know. But it was like $500,000, I think. And I know when you guys went there, it was still for sale, right? And you said you actually got to walk through it.
Yep. And we actually got to go into it and walk through it because it was like an open house. It was for sale.
No, we had always thought about making that the gun channels or the gun websites at the time headquarters, like buying it and setting up shop there and running the empire out of there. How awesome would that be, right? But anyway, we don't have $500,000, so that was wishful thinking. But this time, I guess my second visit in real life, I visited about 1 billion times on Google Maps and live chats and stuff over the years. But both of our surprise, it's like I rented out to like apartment dwellers or something. There's like pool hanging out on the back porch and somebody's vacuum and like 600 cars in the parking lot, and there's a big window in the front. There's like one of them cat gymnasiums or whatever they call that, like thing for cats to climb on that's all carpeted. Like that thing sticking out the front window. Like that's the main thing you see when you look at the place now is this big cat thing. And you could tell that there's people in every single floor. So I wonder if these people that live in this place appreciate that they live in the house that John Browning lived in. I mean, there's a little plaque up front. They must know. But do you think they know?
Right. They probably know, but they probably have no idea of the significance of actual Browning, right? To them, he's just some guy who made a gun, maybe, right? And that's I bet all those people are renters, and because I bet you a real estate agent is probably just started renting it out,
Ugh. I mean, I guess it's cool, but on the other hand, I'm jealous. But from what it sounds like, I wouldn't want to live in Ogden, and I wouldn't want to have tenants. I wouldn't want to have neighbors.
Well, they might be. See, the all the cars kind of is what makes me think it's apartment, like actual rented out now. They have a thing called keepers here, which they'll have people, and they'll give you a discount on rent, a discount on everything, and you move in sparsely to a place, right? And you keep it nice, you keep it clean, and you show it to people. And now you're kind of like the real estate agent, somewhat, just basically unlocking the door. You know what I mean? And to show it to people when people are interested in buying it. but you'll get super cheap rent, and they do that to a lot of the college kids, right? And so it might be a keeper thing where just a college kid has a bunch of people over, but they might have given him the basement or something, and just to be a keeper to show it to people or something like that.
Well, that makes sense. But there was so much crap and like just kind of household debris in the back there. It made me think that, you know, my first impression was just a bunch of people who don't really respect the building they're in. You know, they could be in any apartment and be throwing their carpet over the railing and throwing that kiddie pool out there and stuff.
Well, if it's a bunch of youngsters, then it sounds like we have a piece of history that's being destroyed by hipsters. That's sad.
No, there was no like, you know, hipster type of shit. It was more like just somebody who's like Dead or saying not paying a lot in rent and just threw a bunch of their stuff in the backyard and kind of parked wherever. And but I don't know. I guess once maybe that's something we can look up or figure out.
And there was a bunch of wood outside and stuff, so maybe they've, you know, been doing some renovation or, you know, starting on it, right? But I know a real estate company owns that now, and I know that they're losing money. Like, they're not making money on it, just having it sit there, right? So, and if they can't sell it, and that didn't look like they sold it to those people who were there. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't.
They definitely didn't look like owners.
Yeah. So it's I'm thinking that, you know, real estate companies just tired of losing money on it, started renting it out and doing that whole keeper clause where it's technically they're not renting it out, but you know, they are. So did we talk about the Browning outlet?
Well, no, I thought you said it was boring.
It is like a lot of people think it's going to be like a gun store or something, and really it's just like nothing but clothes. Like there's Google pictures of it right there, the inside of it I just posted, but it's basically like it reminds me of walking into like a mini REI or something. There's just nothing but a whole bunch of coats and jackets and boots and just that kind of Browning logo equipment. But like I think that they had one gun in the whole store, and I think it was like a baby Browning 1911, and it was like in a case and not even for sale. Like, right. And that was like just the only gun.
Remember, Browning made guns, and now there's boots with a deer on it.
Yeah, it was like hanging on the wall behind the cash register, and you know, so like there was like one gun in the whole store. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed going in there. Not that the Browning equipment that they make's bad or anything. It's just I was thinking it was going to be like a gun store, right? And it's not. It's just like clothing, boots, jackets, and stuff. So that's I was kind of disappointed in that.
All right. Well, we're the only two that have been there, and obviously we get all jazzed up going to these places. One of the reasons I did the tour at all, and definitely one of the reasons I ran the tour through Utah, because it's awesome and it's nice to be able to see it again. And thanks for joining me, because it's always better to hang out in someplace like that when you can point at stuff and have somebody who, you know, appreciates it. And same thing, you can see what you're pointing at. So pretty cool. But let's keep moving. There's other things to talk about. Let's talk about dogs. We got Dog Body on here. Oh, Ashley's saying, how about Gallinson's or whatever? So Gallinson's is another gun shop in Salt Lake City, like right downtown. I think it's awesome. Again, we were here in 2010, and I don't remember honestly if it was recommended or because it really could have been recommended. I can't imagine telling a bunch of people that you're going to Salt Lake City who are gun people and not having somebody say, go to Gallinson's. It's been there since 1914, and it's unique in as far as gun shops go. Anyway, so it's right downtown, which is cool. Kind of, because it's, you know, kind of like in a city, really, because Salt Lake City's not it's not shabby. It's a pretty big city, and it's right downtown. So the parking's kind of crappy, but there's this alleyway behind it that's got murals and from like floor to roof, like just everything. It's like a real trip just going down this little tight alley into their back parking lot, and every wall is murals, and they're firearm themed, but they're artistic. They're like, I don't know, skateboard type of graffiti, type of snowboarding, I don't know, some kind of radical Mountain Dew lifestyle type of flair to them, but gun related. And anyway, so it's a neat shop. It's been there for a long time. We discovered it in 10 and took some pictures of it and stuff, and we're just super impressed. But we flew, so there's nothing we could do about it. We just, you know, looked at stuff and left. And then this year we went there, and at first they were like, "Hold on," but then we talked to the manager, I guess, and they're like, "Oh no, come on in." So we checked it out today and took a bunch of pictures and some video, and chatted with the guy that runs the place and a couple of the crew, and we'll have lots of stuff to talk about Gallatin. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And I guess we don't have a rule that we can or have to change or do just one shop, but we'll talk about that again for sure. We'll focus on it. Actually saying they have a guy change the paintings every so often. Yeah, we talked to Tim today, who's the manager guy there, owner maybe, and that's done with intent. He was telling us how that he kind of commissions the local artists, and says like, I want this one to be a Winchester, I want this one to be a Browning, I want this one to be a Vortex Optics, I want this one to be whatever company they're working with or they feel like featuring. And what would he tell us, like, that one is every 12 months we change it, this portion is every like 6 months, and this portion is every 3 months, and around the corner it's once a year. So yeah, they have artists come in on commission, like, and they pay them to go in and make their building look awesome. I mean, it's kind of like going to a skateboard shop, or like what I remember surf shops being like, just having a completely unique style to them. And again, talking about being an ambassador for the Second Amendment right in the middle of a city. I mean, it's Salt Lake City, so it's not like it's anti-gun or anything, but anybody who might be visiting to go ski or whatever they do here in the winter, or go to that school or drop their kids off at that school, then they get an experience of a gun shop that's hip and cool, and going inside of it is an experience. It's a shop that's been there since 14 or something, for crying out loud. So it's definitely got stuff from floor to ceiling. And I guess I'm reviewing it, but we'll definitely chat about Gallinson's in the future. It's cool in so many ways. One of the managers. Okay, thanks. All right, so we're going to talk about puppies. So Woods just took his puppy out, and this puppy here has been getting a lot of attention. But we can also talk about Dog Body's new book. And we were actually, I don't know if your ears were ringing, but I got the dog, and I was over at Dead Horse's place, and the dog was there, so we ended up talking about dogs quite a bit. He's got a little puppy, and we were chatting about stuff and your book and your interest in your sharing of like feeding dogs and whatnot and exercising them came up more than once over the last couple of days. Why don't we start by, if you want to tell people about your book, what's going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I just wrote out a book. It's for sale on Amazon. It's called Pound for Pound: Building Healthy Athletic Dogs. And it's just meant to be kind of a base to get people their footing to start their path on a dog handler journey. I've been working dogs my whole life, and I have more faith in animals than I do people, and I've spent a lot of time working with different dog groups and shelters over the years. I specialize, when I do shelter work, with handling aggressive dogs that would normally get put down. So I've seen my fair share of ex-fight dogs and things over the years, and I try to rehome them with different organizations that could actually still use those dogs, so they don't have to get put down just because their owners were horrible. And I've put a lot of focus in building bigger, stronger dogs in the healthiest way possible. And I kind of wanted to share that with people because more and more I find that, at least, I mean, you don't find this in the middle of the country as much as you find it in the big cities and stuff, but dogs have become, more or less, people treat them like they're almost like clothing accessories, and they forget that dogs have needs and purposes. And I think it's because people have forgotten how to bond with a dog. They've forgotten how to, how to really build that relationship. I mean, we talk about technology and people's relationships, how people are forgetting how to interact with each other. Well, we've definitely forgotten how to interact with our dogs. And there's a lot of bad information out there that people don't realize. I love the veterinary community of the world, and there's a lot that they do right. And then there's things that they do wrong, not because they intend to do it wrong, but because the information isn't there. You guys, like you said, I do a lot of stuff talking about how I feed my dogs, and I'm trying to get people to understand that we have to have higher standards for things like dog nutrition, because despite what a lot of these companies will try to convince you, dog food as we know it has only been around less than 100 years. Commercial dog food has only been around 158 years. And commercial dog food was actually a byproduct of dogs losing their jobs because of the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that, dogs actually had a huge purpose in our society. Dogs were used for everything. Not, people think about dogs for maybe guard work and stuff like that today, but we used to use dogs to power machinery. You'll even find they used to use small dogs. There's pictures you'll find from like way back where they had what do you call them? Spits that would turn on fires, and they'd have basically like a glorified hamster wheel for a small dog to run on. But they had things like that in factories. Dogs were just a huge factor, and I want to help people get back into it. I especially want people to realize that there's lots of activities they could do with their dogs. Something that I'm going to be taking a focus on in the next couple of months as the holidays roll through is trying to promote people getting their dogs into nose work. There's actually the cool part about nose work is I'm going to mess up their acronym, but essentially it's the rescue dogs, first responding dogs who do the search work after natural disasters. We have a mass shortage of these dogs in the country. We only have about 280 of them. And we need more of those types of dogs. It's a big deal. We have less than 300 right now, and that's after we increased the number after 9/11, and we're still short a lot of dogs. But the best part is that you can train any dog to be a search and rescue dog, essentially. So I want to start working on that to get more people into it. But sorry, that's probably a more long-winded explanation than you were looking for.
Now, can you say the title for me again? What, Pound for Pound?
Pound for Pound, Building Healthy Athletic Dogs.
I don't know if you're watching the side chat. Throw us a link, and I'll throw an affiliate link out there so if people buy it off of my link. Come channels get it. Bucks,
Yeah,
get it.
links in the side chat, G.
Right on. So, I don't care. I wanted to bring you on because I think it's a cool topic, and if anybody doesn't like dogs, then they don't have to listen to this show. So I got introduced to dog health nutrition when I got Oro, who's a Doberman 13 years ago. I got him from an eye doctor who he was not going to give those dogs. He was selling his dogs, but he was not going to allow somebody to take one of the dogs that wasn't aware of how to feed them. And that's where I got my education in how bad dog food is, like off the shelf, garbage dog food that you can buy with a Purina label on it or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So here's the link. And like I say, if you use that little short link I just posted on remember, YouTube hates you because they hate guns and they want to get us off of there. But I did post it over there on Gun Channels, which was paid for and created by people who love guns and appreciate your conversation over there. Anyway, I got introduced to how shitty off-the-shelf dog food was. And that's why I'm even more curious, because in the earlier chat, you guys were talking about cost per day or whatever, or cost per meal. But first, if you would, elaborate on the whole concept of like bagged dog food, because I got my own like insight to why it's horrible. But I'm curious what your point is.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna try to I'll bring this back to the big factor. Anybody who tells you that your dog has a different stomach than a wolf has never looked at anatomy. Obviously
we bred a different gestational whatever system into them. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Here's the thing. As a hunter and as somebody who's worked with dogs my entire life, I've seen the insides of plenty of wolves, and I've seen what dogs look like as well. And, even if you go online and you Google and you do a search and you look up the anatomy breakdowns for a gray wolf and for a modern dog, you'll find that they're identical. And what people mistake is they think that just because a dog has omnivoric capability, that makes it automatically an omnivore. And what they don't realize is that no, they have that capability because it's how they get through the lean years. Um, and so, when you take that kind of thing into consideration, and then you start looking at what they're trying to market for dog food nowadays, I promise you, there's not a dog in the history of dogs who's ever gone into a soy field and gone, "Oh my God, I have plenty of food. Look at all this soy that I can eat." Uh, just like they've never been in a cornfield. I've hunted coyotes and wolves off of people's farmlands over the years, and I have never seen a wolf in a cornfield chowing on corn. It's just not what they do. It's not part of their diet. And I always tell people there's a difference between a dog surviving and a dog thriving. And we've been convinced in the last 100 years that just because your dog can survive eating something somehow justifies and makes it okay. And people have forgotten that there's a difference between just getting by and a dog actually thriving. When I see pit bulls who are walking around, and your average standard pit bull, a full-grown male, should be approximately 65 pounds on the big side, and they should have a swooping waist. Yet, I guarantee you, the vast majority of pit bulls you see are closer to 85 pounds, and they look like sausage rolls. And people think they're cute, and you see that with a lot of dogs. I've seen that with, I even see that with bigger dogs like not Dobermans, but with Rottweilers and things. And it spent a lot of time trying to educate people, hey, you got to keep your dog thin. And they go, oh, well, my dog eats so much and I feed according to what the bag says I'm supposed to feed. And a lot of times I tell people, I go, dogs are not meant to run on high quantities of carbohydrates. If you look at how dogs really do their best, the higher the protein, the higher the fat, the better the dog does. And a lot of people try to point out these falsehood claims. The most common one I hear is that, oh, you're going to destroy your dog's kidneys on high protein. And I always tell these people, show me the research, show me the study that proves that. And it almost inevitably, if they have anything to prove at all, they'll link back to one veterinary study from the 1980s, which isn't even a study. It's really an anecdotal paper that a veterinarian came to the hypothesis of because he had a client's dog who had mass kidney failure and found out that they were feeding the dog table scraps. So he attributed it to a overly high protein diet. That's where that whole myth comes from. So, there's a lot of stuff like that I've been trying to debunk.
Right on. Yeah, like I say, my experience was from this like 3-ring binder that the doctor would give everybody who got one of his puppies, and he kind of made us do a walkthrough with them, almost a test at the end, really. And I suspect if someone were not really paying attention and he got the vibe that they weren't going to feed that dog legit, and he was not going to sell them the dog. And in his info, like you're saying, look at the ingredients. That's the easiest thing to do. Just like for your own food, you should be looking at those ingredients. There's some law that makes the manufacturers write it on there, or they just know that in a capitalist society, consumers want to know what they're eating, so they know they're going to sell more food if they put the ingredients on there. And if something that's protein, the meat in there isn't the first ingredient, then that means the first ingredient ain't meat. So it's usually what? Like you're saying, I haven't seen soy, but I've seen corn for damn sure. I've seen sweet potatoes, peas. Yep. Peas aren't the worst, but there's things that like a dog can eat when it's semi-digested in a dead thing. Like, sure, they'll eat the stomach out of something and they'll eat some grass, but it's partially digested by the critter they're eating, or, intestines and almost completely digested. And sure, they're going to get some of these minerals and whatnot. But like say, they're omnivores. They'll eat the whole guts. But it's the meat that makes the carnivore operate. And so many of these things you buy, especially at the inexpensive to normal priced in a regular store shelf, just watch those ingredients. Spend 5 extra minutes in the aisle, and the doctor's explanation, and I'm curious to see what you think, was, or if you've heard of this, but he says that in his research that the recipes, so to speak, for dog foods, you know, they can feed anything they want to a dog. They can put anything in a bag. They can market it any way they want. But
Yep.
they've determined that what people are looking for, like you said, people think of dogs as an accessory. I've got a car, I've got a bicycle, and I've got my dog. You know, when I go out to the park, I bring my dog with me, right? I don't want to have to spend a lot of extra time on this dog. It's not my whole life, right? So they design these foods so that when they go through the pup, they come out as a pellet, and it's easy to pick up out of a yard. So I'm going to have to walk my dog, and it's going to poop, and I'm going to have to pick that up in a bag. I'd rather not pick up a sloppy pile of Play-Doh or a sloppy pile of mashed potatoes. I'd like to pick up, you know, an acorn or two and drop them in my plastic bag and into the garbage. And that's not necessarily the only reason, but it's for them a happy byproduct of, you know, giving you some filler with a little bit of meat juice on it.
Yeah, that high fiber. And you know, you mentioned peas, so I'll touch on this topic. A lot of these higher brand dog foods right now that are out there, they're adding pea protein, and usually they'll add peas, pea protein, and pea starch. Yeah, they have to list it 3 different times to a bag to try to increase the protein count, so that way they could say the crude protein is 31%. And there's actually the FDA is looking into it now, and I'm waiting to find out more results about it. But it's actually probably causing heart problems for dogs. Dogs don't have the ability to handle starches at high volume, and it seems to be causing plaque and capillary enlargement in hearts is being linked to starch in the diet. So peas and potatoes at the high volumes that some of these dog foods are putting in is potentially dangerous. And if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, these aren't things that dogs would be eating normally unless they were starving and were eating the entire stomach contents of a kill.
Now, yeah, I got a question for you, dog buddy. Now,
Good shelf life. Go ahead, sorry.
oh, I was just wondering, is this for all? Like, does this go for all dogs in general? Because I have a Chihuahua, and that's like a natural breed, right? It wasn't like a man-made like toy breed. Like that's a natural wild breed. So does
No,
that,
Chihuahuas are a man-made breed. Let's be clear. All dogs at this point are man-made breeds. But a raw diet for a Chihuahua works fine. I used to work with a guy who used to feed his Chihuahua 3 chicken wings a night.
the vet told us that like the table scraps were better than the dog food. That's basically what he told us. You know, he's like, that's, you know, like whatever you're eating, turkey, chicken, steak, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like just that's what people like ever since, you know, wolves domesticated man. That's what, you know, we've been feeding dogs, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the way that the dog human relationship started, we started our relationship some point in the Ice Age. We would kill things; they would eat what we left behind, and you know that's how they literally, when they branched away from the ancestral wolf, the ones that decided to become domesticated. That's how they did it. They did it because they were eating and surviving off our scraps. Nowadays, like I said, all dog breeds at this point are man-made. We've selectively bred to create everything. But even like I tell people, the only problem I have with feeding dogs table scraps is most people don't know how to feed themselves. So I hate to see them feeding their dog Triscuits. And there are certain spices, like dogs should avoid onions and garlic and some things like that people like to use that you would definitely want to avoid with a dog.
And one thing, like our vet told me, like my dog is like known to be to have like low sugar and stuff, right? And to get lethargic, because I guess in the wild or whatever, that there's like they eat a lot of nuts and a lot of like fruits and stuff, I guess. And so they like he's telling me that I don't get enough sugar in my dog's diet. So now we do a thing of honey, and that seems like it's helped a ton. Just like once a week, we give her like a little mouthful of honey on our finger, and pure honey, and that seems like that has helped a ton. I can't remember the term he used for that, but it was basically kind of like diabetic kind of stuff. Like it was.
Yeah. So when you talk about any of the basically anything that would be considered a toy breed nowadays, there is a lot of not pancreas, it's the wrong word. But essentially they do seem to have a lot of glycemic problems. So you're not the first person to tell me about having a small dog where giving them honey or some form of natural sugar has helped, though there's evidence to show that that has to do with what's happened in their breeding in the last 100 years, where we've made them smaller than they ever were when they were quote unquote wild. Because in South America, when Chihuahuas were bred as kind of these wild dogs, they were closer to the size of a fat corgi than they are to the size they are today. So it seems as the body frames have gotten smaller and we've selectively bred them, that we have caused not necessarily evolutionary changes, but we've caused organ problems so that their systems don't work as well as they used to. Now, that being said, I have talked with people who work with smaller dogs, and they talk about keeping a dog in a state of ketosis, essentially, where the dogs eat incredibly high levels of fat, and they keep the dogs away from all forms of sugar and carbohydrates. And the dogs seem to do just fine, especially with dogs who are starting to show signs where they need insulin. That's how they've been going about trying to reverse it.
You know, we're kind of all over the place here, but one of the things that I wanted to touch on when we started talking about this is you brought it up when you first started describing the book and why you wrote it. But, you know, when you think about what Dead Horse was just saying, and, you know, like the extremes, right? You got your greyhounds, you got your little puppies, you got your chihuahuas, the teacup dogs are even worse. You've got the bulls and everything. And then you got your, you know, strains that are straight out of wolves still, right? So you've got just all over the board. So we've already been like screwing with these poor animals like all over the place, taking them to extremes for whatever interests we got them for, or use, like you say. There's all kinds of jobs they've been doing for us. But first you got that. So right off the bat, you know, we're stressing them out. At least we're stressing out the organism a little bit, right? And then we feed them garbage. We feed them filler garbage, 99% of us. And I'm not saying I've never done it. In fact, this dog's eating out of a bag right now, because honestly, on driving around like this, it is convenient or whatever. I can go into a place and buy a bag of stuff. It has a shelf life. She knows she likes it. She eats it. It keeps her alive. But, you know, when we're not around or, you know, forced to do it that way, she eats other stuff. So anyway, I'm just saying we create these animals that have all kinds of extremes in their biology, and then we feed them garbage. And then we wonder why they're not, you know, healthy and running around. And I think you kind of touched on it too with the whole vet thing. I'm not going to say they're sinister, but it seems like they're more than willing, just like a regular doctor, to keep treating this.
You there, G?
I think he was going to say like he was going to keep.
And guess what? Let dogs. Huh?
Oh, you cut out.
Yeah, you cut out there for the last about 30 seconds.
Well, you get the idea of what I'm saying. We stress them out, and then we feed them garbage, and then we wonder why we're taking them to the vet all the time, and why they're getting these sicknesses and stuff that typically an organism like this, a mammal, isn't going to experience.
Well, I want to be clear about something with the vets. As it stands right now, unless something has changed in the last 6 months, and I doubt it has, your average veterinarian receives 48 hours or less of animal nutrition. The average amount of time that they've told me they received was 1 8-hour class. And those classes are taught by representatives from the dog food companies, most likely Hills. So the very people who go and give our veterinarians these very quick nutshell educations on how to feed dogs are the people who are selling the dog food.
Well, isn't it actually the same people who are feeding our kids candy and like
Yeah, Mars and Nestle.
yeah, a bunch of junk food, right?
Yep. And then you throw into the fact that uh, I can't remember. I think it's on the. I want to say it's on the Mars side, but I could be wrong. Uh, but they own about 75% of the animal drug market. So they're giving you the food that causes the health problems to then sell you the pill that prolongs the problem.
And doesn't solve anything. It just keeps the dog alive in misery while you're continuing to do what caused it in the first place.
And that's why I tell people that they have to wake up. They have to realize there's a difference between a dog that is thriving and a dog that is simply surviving. If survival is not an acceptable level of care, we have to, because I mean, that's not even acceptable for us as people. You know, think about it. If you're just surviving, we're not, you're not the happiest person, you know, versus when you're able to get up and do things and you feel good, you know, then you're really living. And it's the same thing for our dogs. So we just need more people to realize that that's out there. And I think a lot of times the easiest way to do it with people, and in my experience, what I've had with getting people to feed their dogs better, before we could even get on the topic of getting them to willing to put in the time to feed their dog better, I often have to find some kind of activity, some motivation for them to want to spend more time with their dog. And usually, if they spend more time with their dog and they start getting into an activity, whether it be weight pulling with their dog, or they decide to get into nose work, or they want to go do dog agility, then all of a sudden, feeding their dog better becomes a bigger priority for them.
Awesome. So hopefully people will, I mean, your book isn't like a coffee table book that's gonna, you know, put a strain on your relationship when you buy it. The paperback is $10. The Kindle is $6. And how many pages is it?
So the book is about 60 pages, and to be honest with you, you can read that book in about 30 minutes. I designed the book specifically. There's a lot of pictures towards the end of the book, so it's not 60 pages just packed, you know, from edge to edge with words. The book is designed to be a very quick read because I've discovered that when you're trying to change people's minds, if it takes longer than 30 minutes, they're not going to read it. So like I said, this book was just supposed to be a foundation piece. I'll have longer books coming out later that'll go into more detail for people who get inspired, who want to go down that rabbit hole. But this is really just supposed to be a book that is quick and easy to get people started.
Right on. Hopefully you'll jump on and be on the show again, and we'll talk about your costs and your tips and tricks for giving a dog a better diet. So
Yeah,
thanks.
anytime.
So left to right, name your puppy. Dead horse.
Oh, I got a little Chihuahua. Her name's Peaches.
Dog body.
An American Bulldog named Atlas.
Woods.
I'm not undetermined named Abby.
Right on. And I have a purebred white wolf named Marshmallow. So she's getting all kinds of attention, and appreciate everybody who's digging that kind of stuff. And we're going to continue to, like I say, if you'll jump in, we'll continue to talk about aspects of your book and chatting about dogs, because what the hell's the difference between dogs and guns anyway?
Hey, like I said earlier today, you got to have a dog that can carry all that extra ammo.
And now we can talk about dog carts and dog backpacks and stuff. All right, so are we missing stuff? We're probably going a little bit long. Got a question from the YouTube side, which hates guns, which means they hate you. But over on gun channels, bunch of people put their hard work and effort into supporting a channel. It's been around for 5 years. A platform that's been around for 5 years that loves you and your guns, but actually says, you plan on doing one for like working dogs, like hunting.
So what I have written in this book is definitely applicable to working dogs and hunting dogs because I write it from the perspective of somebody who has guard dogs who do protection work. As far as writing a book that's detailed on how to train your dog to hunt, I won't write a book for that, just like I won't write a book for how to teach a dog how to be a takedown dog. That's something that I feel people need to actually go out with an experienced trainer to learn how to do because it puts way too much risk on the dog and on themselves if they do it wrong. So I don't want to give, I touch on it a little bit, but I don't give explicit details on how to do it.
Yeah, kind of like firearms training, right? We can talk about our experiences in a class or whatever, but none of us are going to try to suggest that here, you can take this as a replacement or use this as your primer or something. Like there's just some things that you're better off with a coach or with an experienced person hands-on right there.
Yeah.
And watching your dog, obviously, and that kind of thing. Right on. So, I don't know. Is there anything else we want to talk about tonight? Probably some other stuff I was thinking about, but I'm forgetting. All right. Dead air means to have you on. Quit watching on YouTube. It sucks. They hate you. They hate everything about your passions. Gun Channels is created by people who wanted to get away from that garbage. For 5 years, people have been putting enough money in to pay a lot of money for the servers and shit. It ain't perfect, but neither is nothing.